Welcome back to another episode of the Battle Buddy podcast. Today we're going to talk about a super important topic, and it's mental health. And before we get started, I also want to say that if you're struggling, remember that here in the United States, the suicide hotline number is 988. Press one. I am sure our guest will enlighten us as to what kind of resources there are available up north in Canada, because for the first time ever on the podcast, I have one of our friends to the north, John Archambault. So before we get into it, um, it's gonna be mental health topic that may be difficult. So if you struggle, please reach out to a battle buddy or use those resources that are available. But that's what the topic today is.
Welcome to the Battle Buddy Podcast with Keith McKeever.
So John, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, no problem, man. I'm super excited. It's always great to have an international guest. I've had a couple, but great to finally have one of our friends to the north.
It's I'm very happy, and like you said, we do have multiple type of supports up here. Sometimes they're similar because the VA is the VA, right? We kind of follow each other, but it all depends, man. It depends on the city as well, what they have for each provinces or state, if you wish. Um, and for veterans, we have like the OSI clinic. So it's like the VA, but we don't have hospital VAs, right? So we go to normal hospitals, but for psychology, therapy, so on and so forth, you have kind of one-stop shop for the veterans and the federal police. Those are kind of the only place where we go. And OSI stand for Operational Stress Injury in Canada, instead of calling it PTSD for people who served, because it was usually created in a personal environment. But yeah.
Sounds a little nicer and softer term than post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah.
It kind of has a rough, terrible sounding term to it. Because I know a lot of people here, like, they just want to drop the just post-traumatic stress, which I get it. But either way, it's just how you react to those stressors that you go through, right?
True.
And like you said, it could be from law enforcement, could be from firefighting, could be just anything in your life, or from your time in service. So with that in mind, uh, for all of your brothers and sisters up there in Canada, is there a certain phone number or resource that anybody should call if they get to struggling? Since we're talking about a kind of heavy topic today.
Yeah, so we do have the 811 for mental health in general for everyone, but it's also tied up to just health. Each province have also their own number, I believe. And for first responder, we have Jesus Christ, I forgot the name, and my friend started in this province. This is awesome. Boots on the ground, where actually will be a first responder retired or someone who's off who can answer the phone. So you talk to someone that actually knows where you're floating in, which I find fantastic. So they have this and that province in Ontario have that too. The French province, I cannot tell because I have not lived in it for so long now. But yeah, no, we have supports, right? But the number
Awesome.
would be 811, and then they direct you throughout who you can talk to.
Hey, that's a start. So that is always good. So let's back this up a little bit to your military service. Tell us a little
Sure.
bit about your journey.
So I'm from a family who's against military. So there's that kind of fight. We talked about it before. Animosity between the French and the English. That's because you guys kicked their ass. They kind of moved to us, and we had to kind of lose a war. So, anyways, we got stuck with them. And historically talking, like there's been that animosity for a while. And apparently, it's better than it used to be. But so I was raised in a family who was really French. Like we spoke Spanish. We learned Spanish and learned Portuguese, but English was kind of the no language. I studied in Brazil, and upon return, and I'm going to get why I joined the military, my university in Brazil was not recognized. So at 19 years old, I walked in front of a recruit center, and I walked in and I kind of signed up the paper. I'm going to go there. I want to be infantry. They're like, no, you speak three language. We're going to send you to a communication job. Okay. And they never told me that the course was English only, which I did not spoke at that time. Did not speak, sorry. So anyhow, so I joined. I was 19 in October, and the job was top secret clearance. It was special SA clearance as well, which is about NATO and so on and so forth, which take a long time to get. Now the course was in English as well. Nobody told me that, so I had to learn English. I had to get that clearance where I lived in various provinces in Canada, and then moved to Brazil and yada yada. So it took a little while.
Talk about adding an extra layer of difficulty to an
Yeah,
already probably difficult course, right?
yeah, it was interesting. Let's put it that way. 4 years after this, I mean, they were telling me, well, we won't get it until probably an extra year or 2 years more. And I just wanted to work. So I was like, okay, what is a job that is open? I'm going to go into it. So they put me in logistics, which I ended up being posted into a Navy unit, the headquarters of the Navy in the capital. I was the only Army private working there. I got like the crap job, and I always been hyper, which I learned recently. I have ADHD. To explain why, but there's one of the commander of the ships who were in town, and he was like, son, come in my office. So we went in his office, and he's pointing at a frame, and he's like, do you know what that means? I'm like, no clue. It's a frame, sir. He's like, that's special force. I'm like, okay, people like you go there. They're a hyper over there, so you should apply. And I'm like, I don't know what that is, but sure. So I applied, went through a test, and was selected as a supporter there. And then the fun started. I mean, it was way more. It went from like, a regular pace to it was due like 3 months ago. So you got to get it done now, which I appreciate. And I think it kind of opened my eyes on multiple things. Then I got deployed in Iraq. After roughly 10 plus years, I came back from Iraq and applied to work for the Munchies, the one in the red suit on a horse. That's how you show our federal police usually in the US. It's awesome.
That's exactly how we picture it down here. Totally.
The troopers, right? Super troopers. That's the commercial we have. Yeah, that's exactly it. So I applied for them. Took forever. So one of my friends was telling me, hey, you should apply to a city police here. They recognize the military training. So I applied. 2 months later, I was accepted, and I moved across the country, roughly 2,600 miles away from home, and started the job. So it was a course of 7 months, give or take, and then 150 hours in the street, and then I was on my own. I did the job of coppers for, I'd say, well, total was 6 years. But after 3 years and so, I got sick. I faced a few walls, few red flags here and there, which I guess I could just close my eyes, right? It's sometimes easier to avoid or ignore. And I guess the wall got bigger and thicker, and it hurt even more. So took me roughly a good 3 years and COVID years, give or take, where I was stuck at home. I was hyper vigilant. I was hyper everything. It was hard to travel to therapy because it was through the district where I worked, and I was seeing I had a flashback of the calls that I've been into. So um, and now things kind of switched it, right? So I left the police insurance, and I went back to the VA because they know how to deal with mental health. And I mean, an insurance that we have, if they think you're committing a fraud, they're going to follow you. And I was followed, kind of insulting, because I wrote a book about mental health, about like dark it got in my head and so on. And they're like, well, he's making money. He's clearly in shape. And I'm like, not in shape. I had gained 40 pounds. Communication in a relationship was totally way off because I couldn't speak, or like I did not know, like, am I going to injure her if I tell her my story, or should I just keep it for myself? We had a new kid of a year old, and so there's a lot of things that kind of pile up right really quickly. And the only thing I knew what to do is learning about mental health. So I started to buy books and learn and read. And I'm from a family where my both parents are psychologists, so I was just all over it. Like, let's learn. And then got told, like, you don't have just PTSD, you have CPTSD with dissociation, with a major depression disorder. And it kind of grew with the time. But it was interesting, right? Because when you start learning what your body, why does it react in such a way? That's when you start thinking, getting back control on top of it. So it was very strange because during the first 2 years, I had to select the language right in my head, and it was either French or English, and I had to go English. I couldn't speak the other language. My wife doesn't speak French, therefore I had to pick the language she understood, at least. But like to see the brain kind of shutting down at times that you're not expecting it, to feel rage, and rage being so calm, like it's not burning inside, it's actually you are feeling 100% everything around you. You're really conscious of what's going on and your strength and your flaws and so on. And that makes you a very dangerous person. And the last thing I wanted is becoming, what they show on TV about veterans and PTSD. I don't want to be the guy who take a gun and go shoot people at time. No, right? So the fear of self-fear, right? Like fearing of how you can react if you get angry and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of part that was interesting, and the low, the high, the roller coaster from it. And so it's been 4 years where I'm on that fourth years of recovery that they call, and starting to getting out of it and being more able to drive in traffic, as silly as it is, right? Because when I think about it, I'm like, well, I'm from a big city where they drive like European, and I moved to big cities before that. I'd be a cop in a big city. If it was in Iraq, there's just no issue, no stress. I have issue not to drive, right? Either I get angry at people or it's overwhelming. So to see the brain changing so much is extremely interesting. But I think there's a thing that was eye opener at one point is when I embrace the changes, because there's stuff that we'll never be able to do. I've been permanently restricted to wear a uniform uh, by fear of relapsing, and but in the same way, it's like that kindness is coming back. That self identity is was found, and there's a quest with it, right? Being there for my kids, right? And that's another thing, right? Being there for my wife, being able to communicate now. The body has as well reaction, right? Like gaining the weight, that can be IBS, it can be erectile dysfunction. There's so many things that the brain says, yeah, it's too busy here, so we're going to shut down some of the part in your body, so it doesn't. We don't need it right now. It's not a need. Um,
It's
so
absolutely wild what the
oh
body, like you said, all those different things and more
yeah,
that the body does
yeah.
as a response.
I think the first I guess glimpse that I had in it was dissociation. I was sitting on my couch and I could understand everything that was going on TV, but you would have asked me what's the language, I couldn't tell you, right? So the process was not there, or literally losing 2 hours of my life in dissociation. Like, and I'm coming back to my car, and I'm sitting in my car, my cheeks are wet because I guess I cried, and I'm sweating, and I'm like, what did just happen? Well, 2 hours was robbed, right, from me. Like it was gone, and I cannot tell what it is. I didn't have a car cam to check what the hell do I do? Did I just sit there and my brain shut off? Like,
It's just gone.
um,
It's just,
yeah,
you blacked out. Just
yeah,
time's gone.
yeah. And I remember being in Florida at the beginning, and we're chasing dolphins. We're in God, I don't know, Naples, and as we're chasing dolphin, me and my wife, my buddy just froze. After she realized that she was far enough, she came back. What's going on? And I'm like, can't move. My buddy just doesn't want to go anymore. And then you're super ashamed because, well, you shouldn't go through those things. Nobody talk about those things, and so on and so forth. So I hid. I hid for 2 days in a hotel room. And I was saying, my wife, don't tell your parents. I don't want them to know that I cannot kayak back home, right? Because you're so proud. This kind of part of the training too, right? Like you're extremely proud of it. Um, so it's an adding up. But then you start looking, and I was looking into stats, and it's an average of like 33% now who has PTSD. It's huge. Uh, Now, depending on which trade, first responder, military, and so on and so forth, which war as well as their own numbers. But it's extremely important to see that first, you're not alone. There's a load of people here who don't talk about it, and they still like they shut down the heart feeling. I'm gonna feel nothing, gonna be numb, gonna smile like everyone smile when I know it's supposed to be fun and happy. And if I'm grumpy, I'm gonna act happy as well. I wear a mask, and I'm gonna like navigate through it for the rest of my life, which quite often. And I think some of the reason why we have such a high divorce rate in the military or the first responder, that's the reason, because we don't speak and we just kill it in the end, right? Like, I have 6 years left to do. I'm gonna shut it off for 6 years. What if you cannot open it after? What if it's shut down forever, right?
That's an interesting point, and you've hit on a lot of things that wanted to kind of dive into today, but that one in particular, I think it's an interesting one. Like, how do you turn those back on?
Mhm.
because I've heard that before of like, this person is not the same person they used to be.
Mhm.
I don't see the same joy. I don't see the same, this is the same person that I married, 10, 15,
Yep.
20 years ago. Like they're just not the same person. And I never see that out of that person ever.
Yep.
And it's like, loosen up, let go, let out of your shell, like all these different things of like, do this. And it's like,
Yep.
how does somebody do that? That's I think I know the answer. I mean,
Mhm.
obviously it's work.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
The short answer is 4-letter word of work, and it's therapy.
Mhm.
And it's really the marriage of the two is you have to go to therapy and you have to
Mhm.
do the work and you have to communicate with your loved ones, and you have to just be like, hey, look, I don't know. I mean, I'll self-identify. I'm one of those people, right? Some of those
Oh
were
yeah.
examples of were me. That's my wife. She's like, you're just not the same person that you were.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know how. Like, I don't know how to cut loose. I don't know how to have fun. I don't know how to do some of those things. Like, sometimes I'm just kind of a bury my head in work and a very intense kind of person like that. I,
Yeah.
I
I,
don't know how to, I don't know how to be different.
I agree. So my wife told me one day, I have to relearn how to fall in love with you, and it was kind of it was hard first to hear, and I think it's totally understandable because I was happy with who I became now, right? Because that valve had been shut off for quite close, right? For such a time that now I could feel again. I'm like, oh my god, like I'm gonna feel them fully. But on the same way with work, before, well, we didn't talk that much about it at home. I mean, I remember 2012, I shut off the news because I'm like, this is bullshit. Like, I hear really what's happening right now in our meetings in the morning. This is not happening for real. That's cover up. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna stop paying this crap. And I'm not gonna go political. It's not the point. But I'm just saying, like,
Right. What you see versus what you hear on the news. I mean,
yeah,
exactly.
right.
Like
So
it's not always the same.
yeah, and the thing that I discovered though is it quite often, right? We were trained to use this, right? So I think we're computerized a lot as well with this, right? Like the brain is becoming computerized, where I got to go there to prep for this and this and this, and so at the end of the day, my daily mission is complete, and it's going to go in a big scheme of that bigger plan. Now, if you restart to connect this and this, well, there's movement, right? There's now moral that can as well come in, where moral injury is quite talked about lately, because well, in the military, they gave me an extra day off, and I just had to work 3 days in a row, and I had pizza. Right? I remember like going through this. We did stuff, and I was like, "It's kind of off." They gave me Pizza Hut, and I had like an extra day off. I'm like, "It's a great time." And then when I got out, and the years passed on, I'm like, was that a good thing what we did there? Like, was it okay? Like, was it morally okay in a society? And I'm like, well, probably not in society, because society is not at war. Society is not prepping for war, and so on and so forth. But the reality is yeah, we need to do sometimes those things to the better thing, right? The better down the road. Like if we're looking at police arrests, right? Sometimes you get in a fight, and there's not a fight that or clean fight, right? We're not talking doing that in a octagon or whatever that is, right?
Yeah. It's not like, hey, hold on, let me put the gloves on, put the
Yeah,
mouthpiece in,
yeah,
we're
yeah,
ready to go now.
yeah. And it's not that way, right? So sometimes, yeah, there's things that are questionable at times, but still it has to be done. And I guess comes down to the way of saying, well, it had to be done. Can I make peace with those things, yes or no, right? Or I mean, going through exactly it, like a dirty fight as a cop, and at the end you're looking at the person and they're in coffin. Should I give an extra kick just so you don't understand, because that's not right? And then you're battling not with the person on the ground, you're battling in this, saying what's right, what's wrong, and do I do it or do I still keep my integrity, right? So there's all those things, and meanwhile you're also battling with the past, right? Which, like, all those things you don't digest necessarily, or they went to sleep and then they're waking up now and saying, "Hey, I'm here. By the way, in case you forgot, I'm your trauma from this year."
And you never know when that's gonna rear its ugly head.
Yeah.
And moral injury, I had never heard that term until a couple years ago. Doing this podcast, I had an author on who was into mental health, and in her book, she talked about it. And when I read her book, I was like, it was so eye opening to me, this moral injury idea, because that's when it really hit me on my journey to try to
Mhm.
recover, which, is very much still a journey that's still kind of going on. But,
Yeah.
I grew up, um, you know, like we said, politics. Like I'm not gonna get into politics or religion, but I grew up going to a church.
Yep.
My grandmother was a superintendent of the Sunday school. I went there all the time. Great childhood, right? My grandmother was the kind of person that would, do anything for anybody, always volunteering.
Yep.
And so I saw all these examples as a kid of the great things to do for people, just what you should do, right?
Mhm.
Just being a good person. And then, I had these examples of join the military, serve your country, all these great noble things. And my first deployment was in a prison camp guarding terrorists.
Yep.
And so for almost 8 months, I'm sitting there face to face with the worst examples of human beings on
Yep.
earth every single day, face to face, putting hands on these people, handcuffing and touching them, interacting with them, sometimes. And I don't know how I made it through that 8 month deployment. I never once threw, for some reason, I never fired a single less than lethal round at anybody in eight
Mhm.
months. I always ended up being the guy holding the shield or watching the weapons or sitting there sucking in tear gas.
Yeah.
That was always me. But I was always witnessing everything. I was always like there for everything. But just the things you witness, you go through that kind of childhood, seeing all that stuff, and then you're there and you're like, wow, there's a lot of evil in this world.
Mhm.
There's a lot of messed
Yeah.
up, fucked up shit.
Yeah.
And it just messes with your head. And I didn't realize till years later after both those deployments, I was like, wow, like my second deployment, we had a guy that came in, he was popped on intel. And I don't think I've ever told this one publicly, but I'm getting more comfortable with my stories. This guy popped on intel as wanted. And so we called it in, and intel was like, yeah, he's wanted, but we don't want him enough. So just cut him loose. And we got the intel brief the next morning. He was, found dead in the ditch, got pumped full of AK rounds
Mhm.
about a mile and a half, 2 miles outside the base. To this day, I think it was probably the Iraqi police. Somebody did.
Yeah.
Obviously they knew him walking from the base. It was pretty obvious where he was coming from. But I was the one who took the retinal scan that popped him in the system. And he sat there pointing at my M9 saying, shoot me now because I'm good as dead out there. And he
Yeah.
was dead the next day.
Yeah.
That one messed with me for years. And it took kind of like reading her book to be like, it's okay. Like, I didn't do that. I had no control over that situation. I was
Mhm.
just there.
Yeah.
Like, that was just weird coincidence. But like that messed with me for years
Mhm.
of like
What
I
if?
had something to do with it. Like I took his life. I did not. I had nothing to do with it. It was weird chance. You call it whatever it is. But it took, seeing like reading what moral injury was to be like, shit, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. There's trauma as well by the kind of third level, right? Like you have the one that you first level, which has happened to you directly. The second level where you've like you see it, like you're speaking about, and the third one is actually by a third person, right? And that could be it as well, right? So there's various way of developing trauma, which is extremely interesting. Um, but and I just want to do a roundabout about what you said earlier. Like, I mean, you're right. Therapy is huge, right? The work is huge. I'm gonna add up mindset and the mindset. Why? Because I mean, we work extremely hard. For anyone who goes to therapy, I think it's extremely hard. It drains the crap out of me. And that is EMDR, CBT, whatever, ART, whatever we're gonna call it today, whatever they
Even if
go
you're just
through.
opening up and just talking, I mean,
Yeah,
just to, yeah, just to do that.
yeah. Just to bring it out, sometimes it's extremely hard too, right? You're totally right. So, um, but you gotta want to, and I think that's the biggest spot, right? Because I think that therapy, medication, that's 30% of the job, right? Because you can have a fantastic team if you're not there mentally, it's not going to do anything, right? And I have a friend recently, I think 2 months ago, like just opened my eyes, and he's like, you can only control what you can control. The rest, You got to learn to let it go. And I was all right because I was pissed about politics and whatever's going on in our country and so on and so forth. And he's like, you have no control over this. If there's anything, it's already happened, and you have to deal with it. And he's like, you can waste your time being angry at everyone who voted for that said person, or you can just go on your way. And what can you do with your kids so they're happy, right? For right now, moment present, what can you do now? So it kind of changed, and changed my vision of things. So I removed myself from the news because I was kind of drawn into that negativity, and I really focus on healing. um, so from going outside, that's another thing, right? Nature, as stupid as it sounds, we're from dirt, we're coming back to dirt, let's go have some fun in the dirt as well. Right? So we have the Rockies, we're just above Montana. Going to the Rockies, hiking in mountain, has such a great dopamine, right? Exercise is great at dopamine, but all those things or shifted, and that made a difference. And like, I mean, I have a small brand where I used to hire just veterans or first responder who draw. When I come, like, probably a million of company of veterans with T-shirts, and I switch it to let's go outside. So we're putting out jackets now. It's like, go get warm, cold, whatever the temperature you're facing right now. There's nothing that's going to change you from going outside and just having some fresh air, because sometimes we're so much into our safe zone that it's uncomfortable to leave it. And if you're comfortable, you're not growing. You're not having some growth at the end of the challenge. If your therapy is not moving things inside, it's not working. You're scheming the
That's a good
top,
point. If you're
right?
just sitting there and you're making small talk, you're not making any advancements. But there's a really good point on mindset, because I think anybody who's making progress has gotten themselves in that point of mindset.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've made progress. You've made progress. So we've obviously gotten to that point of mindset. So I guess the $1 million question is, how do we get more veterans and first responders, people who are dealing with mental health issues, to have that light bulb come on and see the light and be like, enough of this crap. I got to take charge of my mental health. I have to take charge of my health in general,
Yep.
and do something about this.
Well,
I
I
don't know
think,
what that switch is, because I guess for
yeah.
everybody's different. So
So okay, so first thing first, talking about it is the key, right? Like what we're doing right now, I think more we talk about it, more it sounds normal, more people come forward, and so on and so forth. I do believe that the new generation coming in uh, has easier access to it versus the older generation where it was a bit more taboo or was not accepted or so on and so forth.
definitely.
Or like there's all those, awful cases of the VA that we hear, but we don't hear about the good one, because I'm sure and I'm convinced, and I know some case manager or people who take care of us who are fantastic. They're phenomenal at their job. So sometimes it's just to look into, okay, well, I have the choice to hear that, the demon or the angel, if you wish, right, or whatever that is, the good or the bad, or maybe like rolling with a half full glass instead of half empty. And that, negative happens, right? I'm not removing that fully. It is there, but if we see life half full, might be more interesting to look forward. Because a lot of us would say, well, I'm not in the uniform, I'm not with my community anymore. I don't hang out with civilian because I cannot connect with them. Well, let me surprise you here. There's a lot of civilians who have the same mentality that we have. They just don't wear the uniform. They're doing something else, but they have the same kind of mentality. So you're stopping yourself from maybe opening to someone. And the other aspect that you realize is, in my own thought, if the people in your life are not putting you in a route or path or where you grow, you should carry on and have new people in your life. Right.
It's good.
Eh,
Good point.
right. Like if I have someone who's constantly negative, I'm going to turn out negative. Right. If your friends are not challenging you or you're not learning from them, or so on and so forth, even family, right? Family sometimes it doesn't have to be blood, but if you are fulfilled in those relationship, then you will grow. If they're empty, then you're stagnant, right? You're not moving. So it's a choice as well, right? Like, is it comfortable to be with that person? Yeah, because I know every Friday he's gonna smoke his doobie and he's gonna be high. We're gonna have funny conversation, munchies, and go to bed. Well, that's my friend. Okay, well, what if instead that friend challenge you to grow? It might not be as comfortable as the first one, but it will bring a new you down the road, or evolve one. Who knows? So sometimes it's to cut off that comfort zone to walk into something new, right? Because it's not easy, right? First time you do a marathon, it's not easy. First time you do half a marathon or 10K or 5K or whatever that is, the first the first mile you run is not easy, right? So it,
That's true.
it comes down to a choice. Do you want to be challenged? Do you want to be pushed? Do you want to love yourself like you should have loved yourself for the past 10 years, but instead you close your eyes for a job? And I think a sacrifice is there, right? The sacrifice is to say, I'm going to remove myself for X amount of time of service to say, I'm a team, I'm part of that uniform. I think we should work on a better transition. That's sure.
Okay.
Where do I
Yeah.
find my identity now? Because it's gone like when I was 19 and I'm at 35, right? Like and it's not easy to build because we're all different, right? That overly pride of ourselves that we've been like inputted, right? Well, it also taught us to shut your mouth, don't ask questions. And I have a funny example. My wife will tell me and explain to me why she does such a thing. Just tell me. I don't need an explanation. I didn't have an explanation for X amount of time. I'm okay with it. Go with it, hun. Right? And it's the irony, but the truth is, she needed to say it. I didn't need to receive it. So you have sometimes to make those. I guess you need to bend over and adapt to different styles. Now I'm going to jump back to moral injury. Have you heard about sanctuary trauma?
No, I haven't.
That's a good one. That's another one that kind of come from the moral injury. So let's say you go through something horrible in the military, overseas, or whatever that is, and your supervisor, commander in chief, whatever you want to call that, are supposed to take care of you, but instead they use that against you to make your life horrible. So it's kind of a double whammy of trauma, right?
Okay.
So that's sanctuary trauma, and that's another one that we see quite often, right? Like, and we've been hearing this from soldiers who said that they've been sexually assaulted, sexually harassed, and then, well, they found dead, or whatever that is, right? Or they are posted somewhere else, or affected somewhere else, or whatever that is, right? Punished for having actually said there's something not great that just happened, or being told like, well, if you come up and say the truth here, your career is over, right?
Yeah, I've had a few conversations with people who've gone through, the military sexual trauma, and obviously there's highly publicized cases. Vanessa Guillen, and there was
Mm-hmm.
another one here recently that
Yeah.
out of Fort Hood again. But yeah, where somebody becomes a victim of a crime, no matter what it is, and
Yeah.
they go to blow the whistle and say, "Hey, there's a problem here," multiple times, and their leadership did not have their back for whatever reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, it's a shame.
It's a shame. It's sad. And I mean, obviously those, and I'm not going to belittle this. It's awful, right? But those are the one we hear the most in the news, right? I mean, they get to up here, so they get shared quite often. And then vice versa, because we have the same problem. Now, we have as well case where people were held accountable, and that's important to be mentioned too, right? Because I don't think that it's 100% of every case that are dealt the same way. Sadly, right? The same as police officer, where some people are okay. Well, that's how you call that, brutal force, or it was too much, or whatever that is. Well, it's not every cops that are dirty, right? Just,
Good point. Yeah.
I'm pretty small. I live in a really, like, it's our Texas in Canada, Alberta, and so fighting was not really always an option, right? When I'm 5'7", they're 6+, so I would walk out in the place and say, "It's French police," and people are like, "What the hell is going on here?" Right? So they stop fighting, or they look, and then I can talk, right? So there's ways of dealing with our stuff, with like everything else, right? But that's kind of all we do, right? Like, there's one uniform, we're going to paint everyone the same way, right? The same with the stigma around PTSD, right? That we talked about. Well, okay, well, quite often we hear, what's a veteran, take a gun, go shoot people, very violent. We see that in movies, we see it in media, and so on and so forth. I did a test here in town. When I got diagnosed, I went to get my dog food. And the guy studied in the French province, and he's like, "Oh yeah, you're a cop, right? Or you're a military, something like this, right?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, I was at work." I'm like, "I'm not working." And he's like, "Oh, what are you doing? You just stopped working? You don't want to?" And I'm like, "No, I got diagnosed." And he's like, "Diagnosed? You have broken legs?" And I'm like, "No, I seem to stand pretty well." He's like, "What's going on?" And I'm like, "PTSD." He's like, "What's that?" And I'm like, "Post traumatic stress disorder." And he's like, "Oh, I'll help you bring your stuff." And he walked me out. And it was not mean, man. I don't think it was mean from his part. I think he just didn't know what to do, what to say, how to handle it. So that's his reaction. I'm going to walk him out. It's going to help him. But truthfully, I felt like I was walked out of the store as well. Right. So being aware of who we talk to, and I mean, I'm sure it's the same with sometimes the VA itself. You talk to someone who are probably phenomenal and physical injuries, but when it comes to mental injuries, well, they don't know how to deal with you, right? He's crazy. No, I'm not crazy. It's broken. I'm not broken. I'm the result of whatever I've been through. That's all, right? And truthfully, nothing wrong with that, right? Like it's all you deal with that is all a change, right? Like, are you going to drink like a 24, a 2-4 every night, or 26 ounces of whatever maybe, or are you going to actually dig in it and dive deep? I don't know. I mean, here right now, the weed is legal, right? So it's been legal for 2019, so 4 years. Well, it's the highest expense that the VA does right now
Wow.
because it's prescribed, right? So I can tell you the first year I had 30 grams.
About to get a flood of Americans coming up there.
So I had 30 grams and I was like, oh, that's perfect. I'd probably use 10 just the pills to sleep because the medication did not work. And I had my appointment and they said, oh, how's that doing? I'm like, perfect. I have enough. 60 grams. I'm like, why do I have? I said that 30 was enough. And this year I'm at 90 grams that they're paying. And I'm like, I don't need that. I don't need this amount at all. So it's the biggest expense that they have, right? And well, you're falling in utter avoidance. You might not drink, but if you're high as a kite, it's not going to process well, right? So, because they say, I don't know if your therapist was saying the same, but my therapist was saying you should be sober the night prior and the night after, because the things you're moving has to be moved back in place. And if your body and your brain is not so well, has been impaired, it's going to affect the reaction of it. So you're going to have to restart.
Interesting. No, I haven't heard that, but that's very interesting.
Mhm.
Especially, is that all treatments or certain types of treatments or just?
That's what my
Huh,
therapist here that I
interesting.
got that the VA was telling me. And they made
Makes a
sure,
lot of sense.
obviously, but I don't drink. I mean, I drink my wine before, French thing, I guess. Wine and baguette under my armpit. That's how I go. But since I have that CBD that kind of cool me down at night, I don't drink. Right? There's no need for avoidance for a while, so I'm just taming off and going to bed. The munchies are good sometimes, but could be worse. Um, but it's interesting because now I'm going to North Carolina to walk 222 miles of rucksack march, and well, I had to find a synthetic medication to make me sleep because I'm not allowed to go across the border with weed,
Right.
which makes sense, right? I'm
Yes.
fully fine with it. And I talked to my friends who are cops down there, and I'm like, can I bring my? Is there a place for weed in the States? I'm like, oh shit. So I had to call the doctor and sit with him and say, like, okay, what do I do now with this? Like, is there? It's okay. I'll give you some pills. You're gonna be asleep like this. And I was like, cool, that works. So I have medication. We were going down there, and me and my buddy were flying in. We're the two Canadian going to join the team, and we're the same medication. He's like, "Oh, what do you think about it?" I'm like, "I'm groggy as hell." Which obviously with the weed, you're groggy at night, or and then the next day you're no problem. So there's that adaptation when you travel with that too, right? Same with whatever, right? You need to get a prescription to go across the border for all the antidepressant and so on and so forth, which we don't really think about mentioning, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of things with the medicines. That was the first question the VA ever asked me when I called about mental health was like, do you want medicine or do you actually want to talk to somebody? Which I still think to this day is just absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
Which I think, obviously you should talk to somebody first and they should, make a medical decision whether or not medicine makes sense. But
Yeah.
all these medicines can do all kinds of different things based on what other kind of medications you are taking.
Yep.
What kind of interactions is it having? What kind of secondary effects? Like, you need to take all these kind of things into effect. Like, still to this day, I'm still not taking anything for my PTSD. I don't want to. I want to try and tackle things through talking to a therapist and
Hmm.
recognizing problems and spotting them and finding healthy ways to deal with things. That's how I prefer to deal with things rather
Yeah.
than just go right to supporting the pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of things you got to take into account, and it almost kind of sounds like your system up there is kind of like a lot like ours. Like, well, just prescribe some meds. Just here you go. Just kind of dish it out.
No, they
And
come together. So at the VA, we have that psychiatrist to us directly with the team, and so you have one meeting per month, give or take, with that psychiatrist saying, okay, well, we're going to try this one at first, and whatever that is, which your therapy, you're doing this, it's going to work out. I can tell you, I went through 18 different medication. I was like you at first. I'm like, I don't want to touch anything. I've never been a pill guy beside Advil because that's what the military give us. But
lots of it.
yeah, T3s and Advils or T4, whatever we are at now. But so I was like, my father went through like a burnout and depression and so on. I'm like, what do you think about the medication? And he's like, truthfully, he's like, it's an imbalance, a chemical imbalance in your brain that's going on right now, right? So he's like, if that helped you at the beginning, good, fantastic, right? So like I said, it took 18 different medication to fall into 1961 medication that I have right now. It's old, but it does the same effect that helps with ADHD medication. So we had to kind of mix those two, and it's a super low dose, right? So my psychiatrist told me you're going to be done this summer. It was especially for the hard part at the beginning, and you can tame off. The sleep aspect is the sleep aspect, right? It's going to take time, so I kind of accept that part. And you're right, right? I think for all those medication, a side effect. This is why peer support is great, because that's when I realized in peer support that the side effect, I was not a one case off. Buddy beside me is like, have you ever tried that one? Does your leg like start trembling at night? And I'm like, yeah, okay, that's that medication. Really? He's like, yeah, when you stop it, it's going to keep on going for 6 months to a year. And I'm like, you're kidding me? And I stopped, and he was right. Kept freaking trembling in the bed at night. One leg, the same leg that we talked, and then you're okay, right? So there's positive sometimes with peer support, because that's another one that has a double side effect, right? Double edge can be fantastic, but it can be extremely bad for your relationship. And now let me just point out those points, because people will be like, why? Simple. If you are in a group where everyone understands exactly what you're going through without saying a word, you don't have to talk. Then you get home and you've been used for an hour, 2 hours, where it was so relaxing, so peaceful to not have like the fear of, or whatever that is, maybe. And now you have to explain everything at home. Oh my God, like, why would I do this? This is bullshit. And you get frustrated to your spouse or whatnot. And truthfully, it would be fixed if you just start talking, right? And usually your spouse is the person beyond belief who wants you to be fixed. And quotes, obviously, I don't think that we're broken, but that's the person who wants you on the right path, right? And I mean, like you started at the beginning, right? Like the battle buddy comes with my mind every time is battle buddy check, right? So we need to check on our people. And the other stigma that we have around is the one with suicide. Oh, that person is a coward, committed suicide. Well, wait a minute. I don't think it's a coward movement. And then there's people who won't probably not agree, but I believe that the person who commits suicide just wanted the pain to stop. And it doesn't have to
Yeah.
be forever. I think there's such a pain for such an amount of time that it's probably not they're used to, right? So let's go with normal numbers. So if you're used to have 2 hours of high pain in a day mentally, and you've been now for 3 days in that pain, you just want it to stop. Now, I'm not saying that suicide is not bad. What I'm saying is maybe we don't have the right perspective of what suicide is. I believe that it's someone who just wanted the pain to stop, like some peaceful time, right? So it's not I will never want to get up again. It's I want just a bit of quietness.
Yeah,
Sadly,
I don't think it's
it's
some people don't just wake up one day,
mhm,
perfectly fine the next day, wake up one day and just decide this is it.
yeah,
It is some sort of pain that has been going on for a long
exactly.
time. They're not getting answers, they're not getting treatment, they're not seeing any kind of improvement. And it could be physical pain
Mhm.
that transfers to mental pain. It could be all mental pain, whatever. Like I don't think anybody really truly gets it unless they've been close to that point.
Yeah, yeah,
And I've never been close enough to that point where I've grabbed something to do it, but I've been close enough to that point where I know I've been pretty damn close.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I know I think that's why I've got such a positive mindset on trying to grow,
Mhm,
because like I've told my wife before, I'm like, I have to keep myself busy. I have to keep myself involved in a lot of shit because I can't go back to like 2020 and during the pandemic when things got really dark for me,
mhm,
because I know I was pretty close then.
mhm.
I was damn close. I can't go back to sitting on a couch with nothing to do because that is not a good place to be.
Then
Because
you
if
should buy the
my
new
mind,
PS5. The PS5. This is the new commercial. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
we have a sponsor, our first sponsor for the show, PS5. But
Sony.
yeah, oh, that'd be nice. But yeah, so you just can't. Yeah, you just can't let yourself get to that point where it gets to the dark place. That's just me.
Mhm,
I have to keep myself busy and keep things going, but I can't keep myself too busy where I overtap and get too stressful, because I've done that too many times in my life too, where it's just like there's too much going on. It's like I can't hold. It's like the old picture. I don't know where like the guy holding up the atlas, right? And he's down on
yes.
one knee and he can barely hold it up anymore. I don't know how many times I felt like that, where it's like one more damn thing that gets put on my shoulders, I'm done.
Mhm,
Like, there's been times where I've had to go up and tell my wife, like, help me get some of these tasks off my shoulders. Like, do this or do that for me, or take care of this, or take care of the kids, or get the kids out of here. Like, I don't need any extra stress.
yeah,
You know what I mean? So
yeah,
sometimes you have to do that. Just realize like where those dark extremes are for you, and try not to go there.
yeah. And I think, but you have to revisit it. I think it's extremely important to say it is you can avoid whatever that dark spot for a while while you recharge your battery. And I think it's a positive way because avoidance can be good at times, right? Depending on how much you deal with it. But let's say that your day has been awful, right? And it's been a shit pit for the entire day. Um, and then you say, okay, I'm going to avoid for an hour or two or until tomorrow when I recharge and I slept a little bit and so on and so forth. And then you sit with your feelings that you avoided. Um, because down the road it comes down to this: do you avoid forever, or are you going to do the same mistake all over again? Are you going to stay in that dirty circle, right, vicious circle if you wish, um, or are you diving in it to fix it? Because if you actually work at it and go through it, it will never happen again because you worked yourself out of that vicious circle down the road. And I think you're totally right. The other aspect is our spouse. I know my wife did everything for 2 years straight. I was a scarecrow sitting on a couch or whatever we're gonna call that. Um, and she brought the kids every day. She built up a business because I moved her away from home, while having to take care of a brand new baby. And now the roles are reversed, right? Like I think the other aspect that comes with it is we do endure the people we love while we recover. Is for anger. My wife was saying like, yeah, I walk on eggshell. That's what I do daily. And if I do something that you think is wrong, we get into a match fight, like a screaming fight. And I'm like, I never realized it because I was always up here, right? So always angry or frustrated or whatever that is because I don't have control over whatever is going on, which is the valve of feelings are reopening, right? And I don't control what the hell is going on there. So that's another thing that I find extremely interesting, and it's has been. I did EMDR, right? The green light that, or red light, whatever the color it is, that it brings you back where your memory should be, like you do it in bed when you go to bed. I did the shock. I had a magnetic shock to my brain, two side of the frontal cortex, and for 6 weeks each, I think. Um, and now we're doing ISF, which is internal system family. Because it is said that trauma are coming from sometimes your childhood as well, right? So and what we realize is because of the military is so young, right? The brain is fully developed at 25 years old. Well, at 19 years old, you're still not developed. So you bring some
Yeah.
stuff with it, right? So some of the way that I was raised, and like you, I would say, and I always said, I had great uprising. Like my parents were great; they worked their ass off. My grandparents, one set I would see more than the other. Um, Nothing wrong with it. Now I went through test, and it says that I had neglect. What do you mean neglect? My parents never like they kicked my ass, but it was kind of normal. If I was not respecting things, like I was scared of my dad for good reason because I was a dick at times, and that's fine. But neglect, and the truth is sometimes you, as a human, has the need of some things, and it's just not brought up. So it's not that we have bad parenting, right? It's just that we did not fulfill the one thing we were in need of. Which affection can be whatever the hell may be, right?
Well, we all have different love languages,
Exactly.
right? I mean, it's something that normally talked about between spouses, but you have that between kids too.
Hmm.
Like every person
Yeah.
is different. So makes a really good point that you may have not gotten the encouragement from one parent, or you may have not gotten maybe physical touch is your kind of thing, and you may have not gotten the hugs and the cuddles
Yeah.
from one parent because they just weren't feely touchy like that, whatever.
Yeah.
So there's definitely something to that. I could
Yeah.
see that.
Yeah, and then you mix. So that's the other fun part. I think with the PTSD. So you look into other mental health syndromes, if you want, or disorder. I mean, ADHD being one. When I discovered that one, while I was 35, it's a year ago, and I called my dad after it. I'm like, "Did you know I have ADHD?" And he's like, "What's ADHD?" Because it's not the right term in French. I had to open my dictionary and look. But he's like, "Oh, we know that." I'm like, "Since when?" 4, 5, 6 years old. I don't know. And I'm like, you never wanted to tell me. And he's like, well, we didn't want you to have the stigma around your head because in the 80s and 90s that there's a big stigma around it. So so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to buy books now because I need to function and understand what's going on with my head. And again, the medication is another thing, right? Where it's a bit different than the PTSD aspect, but it's dealing with having a brain that is not functioning like the mass. So, and a lot of people still say that it's a bad thing to have ADHD. It's not a bad thing, right? Like, and I think it's just different. I just don't think the same way as most people. Which
Yeah.
go ahead, go ahead.
I mean, I was diagnosed with ADD, so the
Yep,
non hyperactive, when I was like second grade. I would look at it like cars, right? A
yep,
classic car versus a modern car. One of them has more electronics and a little bit more. The other one is more mechanical in nature. They're
yep,
both cars. They both get you places. They're just wired differently. They just
yeah,
have different ways of running.
yeah, yeah. And there's again, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I mean, books where I read where it gives you a they call it a superpower, right? That or hyper focus that you can have versus, but you can also be dreamy as hell and just going in la la land in your brain if you don't like what's going on, right?
Yep.
So you can flip, so it can be good or bad depending on your perspective is, right? Back to that glass, is it half full or half empty? It's you pick, and it's going to be the same for that recovery. It's going to be the same with, you know, um, I think for the same reason as you do a podcast, I started one of my own. I needed to have something to drive my life. Right? I cannot serve. I cannot go back in a uniform. What can I do? What can I serve that community? How can I do it? So, well, okay, well, I'm going to talk about mindset. We're going to talk about PTSD. We're going to talk about surviving at those things. And I think it's fantastic because then it gives you something to look up to, right? A form of legacy, if you wish, or a form of giving to people because I'm sure like you do and I do, this is not just a podcast, it's as well all those conversation offline that are happening to those people who want to talk and ask questions. And sometimes we don't know the answer, but if we can help, because it's part of serving, it's part of us too. So there's those points, right? I'm looking at opening a non-for-profit with a friend, a veteran in US, and we're looking at a state right now for helping the transition of soldier, right? Because when you leave, maybe everything you did in the military is not recognized. What are you going to do? Like, are you going to? Like, you need to find a next mission, a next something.
Right. Yeah. Your skills don't always, some skills transition, general skills, some technical skills like, you know, rocket propulsion expert, right? You might get a job at NASA, but that's probably about the only place those skills transition,
Yeah.
So,
And I mean, you're looking at the fighter jets, right? My friend was flying those before, and he's like, I got an offer from one of the airlines, and I said no. He's like, it's like you drove a Lamborghini all your life, and then you're driving like a little Ford from 1950. It's not the same. And I'm like, well, yeah, okay, but you can say that the best year that you ever had in your life is in the past, or you can say I'm going to build up those years now in the future as the best years of my life, and tomorrow will be better than yesterday, and so on and so forth, right? Again, it's mindset, right? You can stick in the past, because I had that mentality. I'm like, fuck, the special force was the best time for me. Like, we were with a bunch of guys and girls who all work towards the same goal, and there's no quitter in this. There's no people just like, oh, I'm just going to punch in and punch out because I don't want to work today. It did not happen. Or I could say, well, that was the best time of my life at that time, and I'm going to make it even better for what I can do now. So sometimes we get lost in that, right? It will never be as good. Well, wait, have you tried? Have you tried to make it better even?
yeah, so you need to look at life as chapters.
Mhm.
That was a different chapter of your life. You're young pilot or you're a young airman, young soldier, whatever. That's one chapter of your life. You transition out. You probably have another whole career
Mhm.
or two ahead of you. You got 20, 30, 40 years till you retire. Then you have a whole nother chapter in life after that. If you have a chapter of your life between graduating high school and settling down and having kids, right?
Mhm.
That's your single party life. That's a chapter. Then you have your I've got kids and I can't go out anymore life.
Yeah.
And then you have I'm an empty nester, I can go out and party again life. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's
Or
uh,
some people will say it's not quiet anymore. Like, it's too quiet. I mean, I don't hear anyone. And I know that's a good one. My dad called me because my sister's 10 years younger than me, and I believe she left home at 24 years old. I left at 17. She left at 24. And I think a year after, my dad calls me and he's like, I'm divorcing your mother. Screw this shit. And I was like, what's going on? And he's like, she used to bug your sister, and then me. So I had a third of it. Right now, I have the entire freaking load bothering me. Do this, do that, do this. It's like I'm retired. I don't want to do anything. But so yeah, depending how you live with it, right? Like it can be different. I know my dad's like, I don't want to think anymore. So he's like, he's picking up cucumber during the summer in the farmland. He's like, this is fantastic. I'm like, what? I don't have to think. I don't think about anyone. I don't help people with their problem. I'm picking up cucumber and it's great. And I was like, all right, makes sense, right? You work the entire life doing that, and now you do the opposite.
it
Nothing
makes
wrong
a
with that.
lot of sense.
Yeah.
I might have to think about not thinking about things when I garden this spring.
Well, but there's something that is actually there's a form of dopamine, right? So because first the gardening aspect, it's creativity. So you're creating something that's going to bloom, grow, and whatnot. And it's ends in the dirt. There's a connection with nature, and it sounds woo woo, and because I think, like you said before, we're really into that medication aspect and so on and so forth. But there is a connection with um, connecting with nature. Why, if you go camping, there's a morning where you're going to just smell. You can smell it's different. It's not the smell that we're so used to it. That is, fumes, electricity, whatever that is. Now you're smelling that, whatever that humidity on the morning, or the snow, or whatever that is. There is something, and it's yeah, it sounds crazy, but it's okay.
I
But
don't think it sounds crazy.
yeah.
I probably have my best garden ever last year.
Yeah.
And somebody else, a fellow veteran who'd been known for a while, Lane Balone, had kind of a challenge of going out and grounding. And so he kind of came out with that last year. And it's kind of the one, I think it was like 6 or 7 different challenges. It was the one thing I actually incorporated. So I would go outside and I would sit and I would take my shoes off. And I don't normally go barefoot anywhere, but I would take my shoes off and I don't know if this is really technically how you're supposed to ground, but I would sit outside and I would eat my lunch in a folding chair and just put my feet in the ground.
Yes.
And then I would go out and garden a couple times a week. I'd go check the garden, but I'd go out barefoot in the morning. And I would just kind of, you know, putz around in the garden and I'd, do little gardening
Hmm.
activities completely barefoot. And which was just wild to me because like I said, I don't go anywhere barefoot.
Yeah.
And it just felt so just I felt so connected and grounded and like just liberated. And I actually kind of can't wait to do it again this spring.
See, if you do it and the cold is another one. So I was looking into this because when I was a kid, my parents kind of overloaded the breathing aspect, right? Because that was kind of taught too young, but it was overused. So when we were in therapy, and they're like, "Okay, you gotta breathe now." I'm like, "That doesn't work. That doesn't do shit." So I've been looking for like 2 years. How am I gonna do that grounding so it works properly? And it had just been snowed a few inches, 6 or 7. So I just removed my socks. I went barefoot in the snow and I just did deep breathing, 3 minutes. For some odd reason, I was like smiling outside. I'm like, I hope my neighbor are not looking at me right now, barefoot in short with a jacket, and I'm smiling because wait, in the right moment, right now, if I'm not looking in the past, I'm actually pretty good. I'm pretty happy right now. There's nothing wrong that's going on. The world's not falling off. I have a house. I have kids that are healthy, wife who's successful, and so on and so forth. That sounds damn pretty good to me. So wait, why am I so worried? And then it kind of dissipate in your brain slowly, right? So yeah, you're right. I have fake grass. I cannot do it during the summer, but but you're right. Like having our feet and that ground, and I mean a lot of people speak about that too when they talk about therapy. If you have your feet flatted on your ground, you will feel a weight going down, and it goes your legs become heavy, then your calves, and then your feet, and then you light again, right? So it's leaving your body. So it's either leaving usually with your mouth when you talk about it, like you said earlier, or as you work, that heaviness, leave your body slowly, or so on and so forth, right? To each their own again, but I think it's really worth it to visit it. I'm looking forward to go to North Carolina because first there's no snow over there, so I'm gonna be
Yeah.
outside. It's gonna be plus, I don't know, plus good for me because this morning it was snowing again. But going outside for that nature aspect and just to smell outside would be fantastic. I'm looking forward to that, because yeah, it gives you a different open mindedness, if you wish.
Yeah. Well, I think no matter what, everybody just needs to find their why, find their reason,
Yeah.
and find that positive mindset. I think that's really the kind of the takeaway. So it's just we got to do what we can
Mhm.
to keep people here.
Yep.
'Cause I know I've mentioned a few times. I mean, it kind of sounds weird when I say it, but it's like we just want you here tomorrow. Like whoever it is, whoever hearing a message, like
Yep.
I don't know who you are, don't know what you're struggling with, but we get it. You're struggling. We struggle with things too from time to time, but we just want you here tomorrow. Like that's the key. Just be here tomorrow.
Yeah.
So, you just got to
And,
reach out to
and
somebody and get help.
yeah, and the mindset, like I've talked to Green Bear friends, Navy SEALs, and or a Praetor here or whatnot. They all say the same thing, right? When they went through the hardest hardship, they were just looking at the closest thing that would happen. So one would say during Hell Week, I'm looking for my first meal because the breakfast is going to be good. I'm going to have bacon or whatever that is, maybe. Or the other one was like, I just want to finish that that part of the training now, and then I can quit after. And then he says like, I'm going to go to the next part and the next part, and so on and so forth. Right? This is the same battle. The only difference is it's against you. It's against old habits that we have ingrained so bad that they creeped into us. And yeah, like one step at a time. It's not going to be easy, but goddamn, it's worth it down the road to change. If you don't change, then go back to your habits and don't complain that things don't change. because you didn't put the work in. Right? You didn't change your life for that better, and accept the help. Right? It's going, like you said, like, yeah, check on to your body, but your body is going to check on to you. And I think it's important that we have our little community at times, because that is a peer group support, where in between, if you're 6 or 7 guys, gals, who are sharing it, I don't know, it can be a WhatsApp group, or it can be whatever it may be, that is safe enough. And someone doesn't speak for 2, 3 days, you're damn sure someone's going to reach out to that said person. So having our back sometime, like when we serve, it's a good thing, right? We've got to keep those kind of quality and values.
Absolutely. I mean, just like you said, when you're serving, if you're out there training in the field and somebody has an off day, you're really, hey, this guy's not putting 100% in today. Something's off. Same thing, like in a WhatsApp or text thread or something, like, hey, I haven't heard from so and so. What's going on? Or something seems a little off in their messages. Check on them.
Yeah.
You have to be connected to be able to spot those kind of things and know what's going on.
Totally.
Totally. It's a lot of these things are. We're not going to stop everything. Obviously, we can't. But if we really did a better job collectively, we could make a big drastic impact on the numbers. And I'm not talking about just suicide numbers. I'm talking substance abuse numbers. If we really started taking better care of our community.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I mean, we have all those guys in our community who are fantastic. Joko is fantastic, David Goggins and so on, and they say go hard and so on. And I agree with them. They're good, but you need to be in the right state of mind to go that full pin. So start with small step first, because if you think that from bottom to go full pin 200 kilometers an hour, 200 miles an hour, you're going to crash, right? There's no speed car that are meant to drive 200 miles an hour constantly. It's not happening. So there's
Exactly
there. So I mean, I'm good for their message, but in the same way, it's not everyone who can get there from one day to the other. So
but those guys are also kind of like, I mean, gosh, I can say it, they're kind of like unicorns.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just kind of rare, intense dudes. I mean, these were tip of the spear operators. These guys have mastered their mindset.
Yep.
Like, not everybody's going to be in that boat. If they
No.
they were,
yeah,
they were going to be right there with you.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, it's great. It gives you something to aspire towards, but
Yep.
for 99% of us, all we can do is all we can hope for is to channel a fraction of what those guys talk about.
Which
they're
is
great.
a win. Yeah.
Yeah, they're I mean, they're inspirational, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
But we just need to know that, like, for most of us, we're not going to be exactly like those guys.
No.
But if you can be 10% of them, I think you're doing all right.
Yeah. I mean, as long as you do 10% better than you did before.
Yeah, good point.
Because I think it comes down to you're your own opponent. It's not David Goggins you have to beat up. It's who you were yesterday, right? But we have those, as same as we have those figures who we see as motivational. Well, motivation is superficial, right? Like what they have is commitment and discipline, because motivation doesn't stay. I don't know a person who is motivated 24/7. It doesn't stay. But what remains constantly is that commitment to yourself and that discipline towards your goal. So if you're planning to be, I don't know, healed the next 5 years, and you give your heart 100% energy to it, it's going to happen. I have no doubt. All right. But you got to do it for yourself, not for so and so who's around you wants you to feel better, because you won't get better. You're going to get a fake better. You're going to have a smile. You're going to wear that mask. That 5 years will be you again, but wearing your mask, versus the person who their goal is to get better. Our goal is to make that community better. How do we do that? It's not necessarily with 50% at a time. It's probably with one conversation at a time, where that person, now I have hope to get in a better path. And you might have to walk with them for a few days or a month or whatever that is, right? Or if you check in, who knows? But you try.
Absolutely. Well, John, I appreciate you coming on here and deep diving with us, man. It's a ton of nuggets of mindset and mental health that we went down the rabbit hole of today. So, like I said at the beginning, it's my favorite topic to talk about. It's,
Same.
obviously it's a personal journey for me, and shoot, arguably a vast majority of the listeners as well. So it's something we're all kind of going through. We could all, I'm sure, take a little bit here and there. So, but tell us a little bit more about, Wired Differently and your podcast and the
Sure.
different things you're doing.
So, Wire Differently came. I was releasing a book named Operation Wire Differently, and it was kind of, there's no war stories, there's no cop stories. There, all my brain kind of switch, and I kind of bring people into this because I'm like, instead of people thinking it's stigma, I'm gonna bring you all dark it gets in my brain. So I kind of touch different type of writing, and while I was doing this, I opened a Instagram just to create my own publicity because I was self-publishing, and I sold 48 ads in 24 hours. I'm like, oh, I could raise money and give that to the organization who help us. So I started to make hats. I hired one of my friends I served with to work on leather. Hired the wife of my buddy who was suffering from PTSD to sew on hats and so on and so forth. I raised good amount. I think the first year I raised roughly around $30,000. I'm like, okay, well, we're gonna keep going. So then I hired for T-shirts and so on and so forth. And currently, I'm sponsoring 2 teams in North Carolina of rugby. I donate to one of my friends here who's going to run the country under 67 days to raise awareness on PTSD. I kind of support what I can around, and I don't take any profit. So I have not taken a cent yet from that company. Like I said, we're now gearing towards more the outdoor aspect, higher quality. I was looking at more like quality of heart tricks, if you wish, but with after cost. Because we all like that high quality material, but you don't have necessarily $800 to spend on the jacket, which kind of makes sense. I would not spend that money. So I don't expect people to spend that. But if I can help people to go out, fantastic. And if I can then give money to equine therapy or retreats or name it, that's kind of what I do with that business. Now, the book is the same. All the profit goes towards whatever organization. I do as well speech to events. And the most recent, what I've been working on is trauma resiliency coaching. So I took a course in California, I took a course in Arizona, where I can get well certified and help people actually going through their trauma. And it's not necessarily going about the past. The past is for psychologists. Let them deal with it. But what I can help you is with today and tomorrow. So how do we going to build today and tomorrow so you're not hunted constantly with your trauma? How can we make it so you're more performant into it, and so on and so forth? So that's kind of the new avenue that I'm doing. And I just have the fun of it, right? Because you're helping and seeing people break through. It's not about, it's again about serving. I guess it comes down to this, is still serving the community, and building something bigger. So, and the latest one, it's with someone who's about to leave the military. She's active military right now in US, and when she leaves, we'll build that ranch somewhere with equine therapy and so on and so forth, and transition to help people. And I would like to have a kind of form of retreat, right? So if you come back from whatever the war zone you are, you have a little housing that you can be with your family, disconnected from the news, and just bound back together for 2-3 days. Because our society is so quick, right? Everything goes quick. Sometimes we need that time out, and just to reconnect with family. Because if you've been gone for a year, it might be different. It might be challenging to readapt to while kids have to get up, they go to school, and so on and so forth. Don't forget, you have to put the garbage out, right? Because you didn't have to do it for a year now. So put the garbage out, prep the breakfast, go walk the dog. Oh, we need to cut the grass too, right? So before we jump into that thing, it'd be great to have that 4 days, maybe a week retreat away from everyone, and then boom, we go back to working. So I'm looking forward to this one, because I think it should be we should do that more often.
Absolutely. I think that's really important to reconnect before you dive into your head spinning about all the chores and trying to figure out what your role is going back, into the family and that whole mix of dynamics and everything. So
Totally.
yeah, there's always something there. I'm lucky I didn't have to go through that when I was in. I was young and single between my deployments, so very very grateful. But there's so many people that don't have that experience, that they do have to come back, and they have families and those dynamics. So, but I do appreciate you coming on and sharing with us. And for anybody who was listening, website and links are in the show notes as always, so you can find them there if you're watching. Of course, it's scrolling, and it'll be in the show notes on YouTube as well. So, thanks for stopping by, John.
Thank you for having me, man. I appreciate that.
Yep. There you have it, folks. Just remember, if there's any resources not on the website you think should be on there, please reach out and let me know. And if you are struggling, like I said at the beginning of the show, please dial 988, press 1.